Former President Donald Trump today announced what he called a diplomatic breakthrough. Israel and Hamas have agreed to the first phase of a Gaza peace plan, a tentative step that could pave the way for a ceasefire and the release of hostages after years of brutal conflict. And while the announcement has produced cautious optimism around the world, the deal's survival will depend on verification, detailed implementation, and whether both parties can resist spoilers and move from words to sustained action. According to the terms outlined by mediators and summarized by Trump, the initial phase calls for an immediate and verifiable cessation of major offensive operations in Gaza, the gradual withdrawal of certain Israeli forces to pre-agreed lines, the phased release of surviving hostages in exchange for specified prisoners or concessions, and the rapid, protected flow of humanitarian aid into long-suffering Gaza neighborhoods. Measures that, if observed, would relieve acute suffering and give space for broader, more difficult negotiations. The agreement follows intensive shuttle diplomacy by regional actors who have long played a mediating role in Gaza, countries that can exert pressure and provide guarantees, and it builds atop a recent U.S. proposal aimed at sequencing security, humanitarian, and political measures so that each party gains confidence as the other follows through. For families of hostages and civilians trapped by the war, the news brings an immediate and profound emotional reaction. Hope mingled with the memory of past ceasefires that quickly frayed. Many hostage families publicly expressed guarded relief at the prospect of loved ones returning, while communities that have endured bombardment and blockade for years urged the world to move fast to restore food, medicine, shelter, and basic services. On the Israeli side, officials stressed their foremost priority is the safe return of citizens taken captive, and the government signaled it would convene emergency sessions to ratify and implement the deal while demanding ironclad verification mechanisms to prevent any abuse or tactical deception. Hamas spokespeople framed their acceptance as a necessary pause to relieve civilian suffering and to secure concrete gains, though they also emphasized that any long-term political settlement hinges on larger issues of governance, reconstruction, and the status of territory that the parties and international community will have to address later. International reaction has been swift and broadly positive in tone, with many world leaders welcoming what they described as the first step toward a durable halt to the bloodshed and urging rapid delivery of humanitarian assistance. At the same time, diplomats and analysts caution that the real test is in the details: who monitors the ceasefire, how inspections and escorts for aid convoys will be guaranteed, which third parties will hold and release detainees, and what contingency plans exist if either side accuses the other of violations. The mechanics are notoriously complex. Past agreements have collapsed because of mutually mistrustful verification, ambiguous timelines, or opportunistic violence by rival armed groups seeking to upend talks. Consequently, the new arrangement includes provisions for international observers and neutral monitors in selected zones, as well as pre-arranged secure routes for aid distribution and medical evacuations, all aimed at building credibility quickly, so each subsequent phase can proceed from a foundation of verified compliance rather than empty promises. For Trump, the deal represents a high-stakes foreign policy achievement that allows him to cast himself as an effective mediator on the global stage, and his team emphasized that the agreement bolsters U.S. influence in the region at a moment when great power competition looms large. That political upside is tempered by the enormous responsibility of ensuring the agreement actually reduces violence and delivers tangible relief. Critics warned that premature celebration could backfire if implementation stalls and if rhetoric outpaced reality. Observers also noted the delicate balancing act Washington must perform, using diplomatic leverage and incentives to keep both parties committed, while avoiding any appearance of imposing a settlement that lacks local legitimacy. The broader humanitarian dimension is urgent and unavoidable. Gaza's civilian population has suffered catastrophic loss of life, displacement, and infrastructure collapse. Hospitals have been overwhelmed, water and power systems damaged, and basic sanitation endangered. Even a temporary ceasefire could allow medical teams to treat critical injuries, permit engineers to repair vital infrastructure, and let humanitarian organizations reach populations who have been cut off for months. International aid interlocutors stressed that the window for effective relief is narrow, and that logistical hurdles, from safe corridors to fuel supplies and security for staff, will require immediate coordination between Israel, Palestinian authorities, mediators, and donors. Politically, the agreement also reshapes regional calculations. Neighboring countries that facilitated talks have strengthened their diplomatic standing and influence by brokering a mechanism that prioritizes humanitarian relief and hostage returns. At the same time, the Kremlin, Tehran, and other external actors will assess how the reset affects their own leverage. For Israel's government, approving the deal requires political courage because it must balance domestic pressure for security guarantees with the emotional imperative to bring hostages home. For Hamas, accepting a phased approach risks internal criticisms from hardliners who oppose any restraint, making the movement's unity an open question during implementation. The fragile calculus means that spoilers, armed factions on the ground, radicalized individuals, or external patrons, could still attempt to derail progress, which is why the role of credible monitors and rapid international pressure to punish violations is baked into the plan. Ultimately, while the first phase is cause for cautious hope, it is hardly the end of the story. It is a bridge to more painful, complicated conversations about reconstruction, governance in Gaza, border arrangements, and long-term security architectures that prevent the return of sustained hostilities. If the deal holds, it could alter the human trajectory for hundreds of thousands by enabling rebuilding and by providing breathing room for diplomacy. If it collapses, the region risks a renewed cycle of violence with all the attendant civilian suffering and geopolitical fallout. For now, diplomats, humanitarian agencies, and families on both sides wait and watch as the fragile steps toward peace are taken. Verification teams prepare to move. Aid agencies organize convoys, and negotiators brace for the hard work ahead. This moment, therefore, is both an opening and a test, an opportunity to prove that even the most entrenched conflicts can begin to change when parties accept limited, verifiable measures, and when the international community commits to swift, coordinated follow-through. But the promise of peace will only be realized if words are matched by durable action, transparent verification, and the political will to carry the fragile process forward.